All right, we're going to be looking at this text together. You may know the name Albert Camus. He's a famous French author. He has this famous quote. It goes like this: "Life is the sum of your choices." Life is the sum of your choices. Now, since Camus wrote that quite a number of years ago, that phrase has been used by everyone from department stores to garbage bag manufacturers to advertise their wares. It's been watered down from Camus' original punchy meaning to illustrate the importance of buying extra strength, easy tie garbage bags so your garbage doesn't, spill all over your kitchen or whatever. Still, we intuitively understand Camus' point. Life is about choices. It's about all the small choices, what you're going to eat for lunch, what day to schedule a dentist appointment on. It's about medium-sized choices, what summer camp to send your children to, what kind of car to purchase. And it's also about large, life-changing size choices, as in the passage today, which Jesus is talking about what you value. Jesus is talking about treasure, the things you care about, what you really want in life, what you love. And because it's in parable form, in story form, Jesus never bluntly comes out and asks you, what do you want most in life? Instead, he's going to tell you a story about someone who loved something more than anything else, and we'll leave it to you and I to fill in the gaps. But wonderfully, Matthew, under the inspiration of the Spirit, has sort of paired these parables with some real-world examples of people really grappling with what they love and what they value and what they treasure. Some people in this story clearly love Jesus. They want to believe in him, while others do not believe in, and we'll talk about these people in Nazareth who are very openly skeptical about Jesus. So we'll deal with this text in three parts, if this is helpful for following along. We'll first talk about these parables, choosing well. What does it mean to choose well? And then we'll look at the examples of these people and see some who choose wisely and some who choose poorly. Now, just as a very quick reminder, in the middle of Matthew's gospel in chapter 13, Matthew has assembled 8 parables in one chapter. He's just doing them all back to back. It's actually pretty unlikely that Jesus told all of these in a single set of teaching. Maybe he's wandering around, he's telling them throughout a day. Matthew has put them all together for us so we can get this really multifaceted look at what the kingdom of heaven is. And as you'll see next week, from here, Matthew dives back into some action stories. Jesus is again up to some stuff, miracles, healings, whatever. We'll get to it. But let's begin this morning by looking at the 2 parables in 44 and 45. First, in 44, Jesus compares the kingdom of heaven to treasure hidden in a field that a man finds, he covers up, and joyously goes and sells all that he has to buy the field and thus acquire the treasure. Couple things to notice. First, the kingdom of heaven is a treasure. It's extremely valuable. We'll come back to this in a moment. Second, the kingdom is hidden. It's not seen by everyone. Presumably, others had walked through the field, worked in that field as a laborer or whatever. They had not discovered it. The kingdom is not viewable by all. There is something hidden about the way the kingdom of heaven works. Third, once the man finds the treasure, he covers it up again. Now, this is not illegal. This man is not doing something suspicious or shady. Rather, in time before banks, what you do with your riches if you had them, is you'd hide them somewhere to keep them safe. You'd often put it in a clay pot, kind of seal the top, with some wax and stuff like that. And then you'd take that treasure and you'd put it under your dirt floor or in your field or something like that. So the most likely scenario here is the original owner of the field hid some treasure in it and then has left or passed away or whatever before they could unearth it, leaving it to be discovered later. Fourth thing, the man must sell everything he has to get the field. We aren't told what the field costs. We aren't told how many assets the man had. Was he very poor? Was he very rich? We don't know. But it took everything. That is the point. Fifth, he sold everything he had joyfully, joyously. He was not begrudging or reluctant. He was glad to do it. I mean, imagine if you went to like one of those, like an open house, a house showing, and you accidentally discovered millions of dollars hidden in like the downstairs bathroom or whatever. Well, it's no loss then to go sell your current house or car or your MacBook or whatever, because you understand, well, the reward on the other side of selling all these things more than balances the scales. So he sells joyfully, joyously. Okay, let's look at the second parable. We'll kind of compare the two as we go, and then I'm going to draw some conclusions. In the parable about the pearl, the merchant is looking for fine pearls, and he finds the pearl to end all pearls, the pearl of his dreams. And he too must sell all he has in order to buy this one great pearl. So first thing to notice here is whereas in the first parable, the man sort of stumbles over it accidentally. He's like, ooh, treasure, didn't know that was going to be here. In this second parable, the man is on the hunt for the best pearls. He's a merchant. He is wandering the earth looking for great pearls. So there's a difference in approach, there's a difference in method by which these people come across their treasures. Second, in the case of the pearl, it does not seem to be hidden in the way the treasure was. It's on display. It's like, here, you can buy it if you have enough money to afford it. Third, the second parable does not discuss the joy of the merchant. He just sort of does it. Perhaps he's not in touch with his emotions. Maybe he was joyous and Matthew didn't, or Jesus didn't mention it. The emotional element is not described, not included. Fourth, buying a single pearl is different from buying a treasure, because in the case of treasure, if you have like a whole box of gold coins or something, you could presume that the man could live off its proceeds. You could sell it or, trade it bit by bit, use a little bit of gold here, a little bit of gold there. But if you just own one enormous, beautiful pearl, like what are you going to do with that? You can't live off that. You can't shave a bit off the side to pay for a meal. If you have a great pearl, they're for admiring, putting on a necklace, putting on display in a museum. They're not useful in the way that a big box of treasure would be. So then, what are we to make of these two parables? What's it saying about the kingdom of, what are they saying about the kingdom of heaven? The first thing I think is that people come into the kingdom in different ways. Remember the first man, like the laborer, he stumbles across the kingdom. The second man diligently searches until he finds it. Similarly, some people are coming across the kingdom, or some people are here in church today, not because you were looking for the kingdom, but because you have stumbled across it on the way to do something else. There are lots of stories out there of people who went to church, not because they were interested in spiritual things, but because they wanted friends, or because a cute boy was there, or because it pleased their grandmother or something like that. Some people refer to themselves, like C.S. Lewis did, as reluctant converts. Like, I'm in the kingdom, but I'm not happy about it. I'm here sort of against my own will. But that's not true for everyone. There are others, like, I don't know if you know the name, Nabil Qureshi. He is a famous author. He wrote a book called Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus. He writes about his own journey, which was this multi-year long, exhaustive investigation into the claims of Jesus. He'd grown up Muslim, but he had these unending conversations with a Christian friend and apologist. And you read Nabil's story, and it's pretty clear he was on a very diligent search for the truth. More diligent than 99% of us. And when he found it, when he found Jesus, he gladly gave everything he had for it, which in his case was quite substantial. The point is, people come across the kingdom in many different ways. Secondly, what is common to both is that they both recognize the value of the kingdom of God. The laborer knows the treasure is worth everything. The merchant knows this pearl is going to cost him all he had. And they're both say, yes, I am willing to make that exchange. The terms are acceptable. They both recognize the value of what they found, which is the kingdom of heaven. And as we talk about the worth of the kingdom of heaven, I want to distinguish something important for us. There are actually two ways the Bible speaks about the worthiness of Jesus and the kingdom of heaven. The first way is comparative, and it's what we find in these parables. When you compare Jesus and the kingdom to anything, Jesus is way more valuable. Nothing in the world is his equal. But the Bible also speaks about Jesus and the kingdom in a complementary way, that regularly our love for Jesus and his kingdom is not in competition or doesn't need to be compared with our other loves, but complements them and even enhances them. Let me give you an example. I love my wife, Jen, quite a bit. You know her. She's the best. She's also a great cook. And when we were newly married, she introduced me to a great recipe called classy chicken. And it is very classy, you should know. It's this chicken and broccoli and cheese and soup mix. It sounds kind of crazy, but it's truly amazing. It's one of my favorite dishes. I love classy chicken. Now, do I love Jen more than I love classy chicken? Of course. If you're asking me to compare them, which is a greater love, well, there's no contest. But you know as well as I, in real life, those loves are not actually in competition with each other. My love for Jen enhances my love for Classy Chicken because she was the one who made it for me first, and vice versa. So my point here is these parables are encouraging us to take a test. It's a test you give yourself, a very important test about the comparative value of the kingdom of heaven with everything else in your life. They're telling us the kingdom of heaven should command your highest and greatest love. So that is the most important question the text, Jesus, these parables are asking of you and me. Do you believe deep down that the kingdom of heaven is worth everything you have? Or is there something that you're saying, no, I kind of don't want to give this. If God asked for that, I'm not sure. Maybe it's this job. If God takes away this job, or I never have a chance to get that job, or it's about a person or a spouse, or a lack of a person or a lack of a spouse, or kids or lack of kids, where you live or don't live. Like there's 100 things it could be. And the parables are saying, are you willing to put everything on the table with God? Are you the laborer? Are you the merchant who is willing to go and say, yeah, I'll sell everything if needed to receive the kingdom of heaven? Because the kingdom asks for your highest loyalty. Jesus wants to be the greatest treasure in your life. But remember the other way the Bible talks about it. There's a caveat here. There's a danger if you push this parable too far and make life into one long permanent test, to become a permanent test taker. There is a danger in that you keep on comparing everything in your life to the kingdom of heaven and ask things like, well, would I give up my dog for Jesus? Would I sell my house and become homeless for Jesus? Would I move to this place I hate for Jesus? Like there's a time and a place and a way you can ask those questions, but most of the time, those loves are actually not in competition. Our love for our house, if you love your house, maybe you don't, it's complemented by our love for Jesus because we recognize, oh, my house is from him. He gave us this house. Or my family, or the kind of work we do, or the family pet, or the vacation you get to go on. The secret of contentment is to recognize all of these are gifts. And you can love camping and love Jesus, and they are not in competition with each other. So yes, take the comparative test. But no, don't become a permanent test taker. And just so you know, it's not drudgery. The laborer sells all that he has joyfully. There is a deep happiness to life with God. There's a profound satisfaction when Christ is your greatest treasure. It goes to work on your heart on a deeper level. See, what we want out of life, whether it's a sense of peace and calm, stability, love, acceptance, someone to know us and care about us, or maybe truth, justice, order to the universe, life with God and the world to come, like whatever it is that sort of really tweaks you, this is what is offered to us in Christ. This is the treasure. And so you must choose. Whether you stumble over the kingdom or have diligently sought it out, I'm not sure why you're here this morning, but you must make a choice. And this is what the rest of the passage highlights. It gives us illustrations. It shows us, watch these people choose. Now, just before we get to that part where we watch them choose, let me quickly say the parable of the net in 47 through 50. If you were here last week, this is extremely similar to the parable of the weeds. Like the beats of the story are quite the same. Angels sorting out good from evil, the furnace, the gnashing of teeth, it's all in the parable of the weeds. And so I'm not going to spend basically any time on it because I'd just be repeating much of what I said last week. But I'll tell you, I think Matthew puts it here as a way of reminding his listeners, his readers, that our choices about the kingdom have eternal consequences. These are not minor choices we are making. They are substantial. It's not just about pearls. It's about life in this world and life in the world to come. So with all that said, let's talk about choosing wisely. So Jesus arrives at the end of his parables. All these parables he's told in this chapter, all have different points to them. 2 of the parables were explained, 5 were not. 2 parables were quite long, 5 were quite short. And at the end of all this teaching, in verse 51, he asks his disciples, now you can't tell from this passage that it's the disciples, but if you could scroll or turn back earlier, you'd see the disciples were the primary audience here. He says to his disciples, well, have you understood all these things? And they say, yes, we have. And that makes me chuckle. When I first read it, I'm like, that's sort of silly, because first of all, parables are not easy to understand. There are layers of meaning to them. They actually had to ask Jesus to explain multiple parables because they didn't understand. And I don't think there's any way, without time to reflect, that they can claim to understand everything Jesus has taught. Do they really understand that Jesus is the sower, the fisherman, the judge, the reaper, the treasure, the great pearl, and so on? I mean, even if you asked me, Ben, do you understand all the parables of Jesus? I'd be like, well, on some level, but not on all the levels. There's depths I'm sure I have not plumbed. That I'm not confident about what every part means. So parables are tricky, but also we know the disciples don't understand everything because in subsequent chapters, they will show us. They will prove that they don't get it. They will get the kingdom of heaven wrong. They will misunderstand Jesus. They will not be willing to trade everything else in their life to follow Jesus. They will run away when trouble comes. And of course, the traitor, Judas Iscariot, he will sell Jesus out for money. He will literally value earthly treasure over heavenly treasure. So they've heard the teaching, and they've not understood it, at least not all the way down. And yet, there is something really beautiful about this response. Because it's simple faith. It's faith that wants to understand. Faith that is seeking understanding. They've understood in part. They believe as much as they know, but which is perhaps a very helpful definition of what it means to follow Jesus. You know, sometimes in churches like ours, we come from a Reformed tradition that values reading and learning and studying and education. Sometimes we think, I have to arrive at a very sophisticated understanding of the world and the kingdom. I need to have all my categories lined up. I need to have carefully examined every issue and have my theological categories sorted. But I assure you, as someone who has studied at least reasonably deeply, that however deep you think you want to go, there is always more. And perhaps we ought to learn a lesson from other kinds of churches or denominations who emphasize a simpler kind of faith, to be content with understanding in part, understanding the basics and simply beginning. You don't have to have a carefully considered opinion on every theological topic. You can just begin with what you have now. And the disciples have understood in part. They're like children in the faith, and that's okay. They are going to grow into their faith. They will have ups and downs later. They will eventually become apostles, mighty oaks of righteousness. But here and now, they understand enough. Perhaps this morning, some of you are on the fence about Jesus. You've come to our church because you're like, I want to know more. I want to understand more. I don't get it. And that's a good and noble desire. We welcome it. But I think Jesus also presses us in these parables, in this passage, not to wait too long. If you've understood even at a simple level who you are, who Jesus is, what he did, that's enough to begin. And to these disciples who somewhat naively say, yes, we've understood all of your parables, Jesus likens them to people who own a house, and out of their house they bring old and new treasures. And maybe when that was read earlier, you're like, what's he talking about? Why would a person who understands the kingdom be like a person who deals in new and old treasures and shares them? Well, here's the connection. The current scribes in Israel, the current religious experts, they are refusing Jesus. They disagree with him. They don't like him. They're trying to get rid of him. And they would describe themselves as experts in the law of Moses, or what we might call old treasures. The current scribes are skilled at bringing meaning out of all the old texts, saying, this is what Moses meant in Deuteronomy and Leviticus. This is what it means, and I'm going to share this with all of the people. But Jesus is saying a kingdom scribe is not just a person who knows the old treasures, but a person who knows the new treasures. Well, what are the new treasures? There's a through line from the parable above. Who was the parable, or who was the treasure that was stumbled over in the field? Well, it's Jesus. Jesus is the new treasure. It's the new teaching he's bringing, the new way to God that's opening up for the Gentiles. So we might say then, a person who is fit for the kingdom is avoiding two extremes. On one hand, they're avoiding this extreme of Old Testament only what's old and tested and whatever. But they're also avoiding the extreme of New Testament only valuing what's new and exciting. The new treasures are important to understand Jesus. It's about him. He's the greatest treasure, but the scribe of the kingdom understands that there are two treasures and shares them. To be a person who's fit for the kingdom is not only to believe it for yourself, Jesus is saying, but to offer that treasure to others. To be willing to say to any friends and neighbors, hey, you too are a merchant on a hunt for a great pearl. All of us, we are stumbling through a field. We are all tripping over a great treasure we can all take part in. See, we don't have a zero-sum game in Christianity. It's not as the Mormons would teach where, well, you have to be one of the top 144,000. That's all that get in. That's not what Christianity teaches. We can all share in the treasure of Christ. The disciples are choosing wisely. They are making their decision, even in a childlike way, to follow Jesus and believe in him. But that takes us to part 3, choosing poorly. The chapter concludes, it says Jesus goes away from there. Now, where is there? We aren't quite sure. Chapter 13, verse 1, just said Jesus was beside the sea. So he leaves the sea, his seaside teaching post, and he goes back to his hometown. Now, that's a place called Nazareth. Matthew doesn't name it as Nazareth here. He just calls it his hometown. Lots of other places in the gospel tell us this is where he went. So he goes back to his hometown. He begins to teach in their synagogue, and everyone's astonished. They're very impressed. Like a college graduate who goes back to his little village, and everyone's like, weren't you the little boy, and now you're this grown-up trained man. It's sort of this sort of vibe. But their astonishment at his teaching quickly morphs into offense. And from verse 54 and onwards, they sort of erupt into this series of questions. They're wondering, well, where did you get all this wisdom from? Where did you get these mighty works from? The implication is he didn't get them from Nazareth. Are they from God? Are they demonic, as the Pharisees argued? Are they tricks? And then they ask this whole series of questions that imply Jesus is supposed to be a normal guy. They point out his parentage. They're like, this was the carpenter's son, just an average laborer. This is Mary's boy. He's supposed to be this kid from a normal family. They're like, we know his brothers, James, Joseph, Simon, Judas. We know sadly, the sisters didn't get named. The unnamed sisters, they still live in town. The sister lives around the corner. And their point right at the end of verse 56 is that they're still with them. That is, they're still in their rightful spot. Why are these townspeople taking offense at Jesus? I suppose it seems to them that he's putting on airs. He's this big shot now. He's left home and he's had all these experiences, and they're like, we got to cut him back down to size. We got to reduce Jesus to who he used to be or who they want him to be. If you notice in their argument, they don't deny the wisdom. They don't deny the mighty works. They just simply say to Jesus, you don't have any business teaching us. You don't fit into our categories. And thus we reject you. We're offended by you. And this mirrors our world. Some people are offended at Jesus. And it's often not because they're picking a fight with any particular thing in the gospel, but it's because Jesus is laying claim to something, an identity, a power that they say, well, it's not right for him to claim. And if we go back to our original 2 parables, Jesus has claimed he is the most valuable treasure. He is worth being your highest priority. He outweighs everything else in life. And some look at that claim, and perhaps you're here this morning and you look at that claim and think, well, he doesn't have the right to ask that of me. He's just some ancient Middle Eastern teacher. He's got some good lines, a couple clever comebacks, but he can't ask me for anything. Ultimately, many people, like the people of Nazareth, say to Jesus, look, you don't have the right, you don't have the standing to tell me how to live my life. Interestingly, Jesus only lightly reproves them, basically saying, I'm honored everywhere except here. And then he either refuses or is hampered from doing miracles because of their unbelief. Their skepticism, the hostility, creates an environment where not much happens. And sadly, it's the people of Nazareth who are acting out the parable of the net, where they were in the sea of the world. They had this chance to respond to Jesus, but they refused it, at least at this point. We don't know the ends of their stories. They tripped across the treasure that was buried in the field. Actually, the treasure came to their town, and they decided, we don't want to sell everything we have. They came across the most wondrous pearl. The most wondrous pearl came and taught in their synagogue. And they decided, we are not willing to part with everything else to gain it. The kingdom of heaven, Jesus, he is worth everything, anything you have. But we are reminded here, you will feel the cost. There will be times where it pinches. There will be times when some cargo must be thrown overboard of the ship of your life. You have to fit through the eye of a needle, Jesus says. You have to walk a narrow road if you'd like to enter the kingdom. And sadly, the people of Nazareth conclude, no, the cost is just too high. Let's conclude with this. In the early 2000s, a band called Finger 11 released a song called One Thing. Now, Finger 11, if you weren't into this kind of music, they're a Canadian band. They're from Burlington, Ontario, and they're mainly known for their grunge rock, alt rock, even metal sort of sound, loud and obnoxious. Teenage band just really appreciated their style of music. But their biggest hit was this song, One Thing, released in I think 2003. And it wasn't a loud, obnoxious song. It was a quieter, more meditative song. And I want to read the chorus to you. And they sing this: if I traded it all, if I gave it all away for one thing, just for one thing, if I sorted it out, if I knew all about this one thing, wouldn't that be something? Now, like a lot of modern music, it's unclear if Finger 11 is singing about a risky romantic relationship or about God. We don't know. I watched the music video to see if I could get any clues. Couldn't figure it out still. It's too weird. What is the one thing that they were considering giving everything else away for? We're left not knowing, but we can repurpose it for our own uses. You can repurpose it for your life. You can ask yourself the question, what if you traded it all? What if you did give everything away for one thing? What if you decided, I am going to know all about this one thing? Well, that would indeed be something. And that is the offer Jesus makes to each of us in these parables. This is one of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven, that if you trade everything for one thing, that is indeed something. Something beautiful, something joyous, something worth it. I pray that God will give you ears to hear. Let's pray. Lord, this parable challenges us. It asks difficult questions of us. It puts a comparative choice in front of us and asks us to decide about Jesus. I pray that you would reveal Jesus to us, that we might see him and understand him, that we might understand the kingdom of heaven in all of its glory and all of its worth. Give us the courage that we may need to choose Jesus. And we ask all this in his name. Amen.